Marcus, you're fired. Isabella Reed, the new CEO, flown in from corporate headquarters. Today was her first day, and I was the first person she cut. Why? There is no why. The company no longer requires your services. It's that simple. Her eyes looked through me like I was a piece of obsolete hardware. Clutching a cardboard box that held the last 10 years of my life, I walked home in a daze. I had no idea how I was going to tell my wife, Grace. I pulled out my key and opened the front door to our condo. In the living room, two women were sitting on the sofa, elegantly swirling glasses of red wine. One of them was my gentle, loving wife, Grace. The other was the woman who had just fired me, the ice-cold, beautiful Isabella Reed. They were laughing, having the time of their lives. When a buzzing roar filled my head, and my mind went completely blank. The keys slipped from my trembling hand, clattering loudly on the hardwood floor. The laughter in the living room died instantly. Grace and Isabella turned their heads in unison, the smiles still frozen on their faces. A flash of panic crossed Grace's eyes before she quickly masked it. She sat down her wine glass and stood up, walking toward me with that tender smile I knew so well. "Honey, you're home. What are you doing back so early?" Her voice, sweet and soft as always, usually felt like a gentle caress. Today, it felt like a poison needle twisting in my heart. I didn't answer her. My gaze went past her shoulder, locking onto the woman still sitting calmly on the sofa. Isabella. She stood up as well, her tailored black business dress perfectly accenting her stunning figure. She wore a neutral expression, looking at me with the same detached gaze she'd had in the office that afternoon when she'd handed me my death sentence. Cold, indifferent, as if I were a complete stranger. "Isabella, what are you doing here?" I heard my own voice tremble. Before Isabella could speak, Grace jumped in to explain. "Oh, honey, I forgot to tell you. Bella is my best friend. We grew up together. She just moved back to the States, so I invited her over." Best friend. I felt like I'd been struck by lightning, rooted to the spot. I'd been married to Grace for 3 years. In all that time, she had never, not once, mentioned a best friend named Isabella, and I certainly never knew that her supposed best friend was the same woman who had just kicked me to the curb. The world suddenly felt ridiculously, cruelly small. Is that so? I stretched my lips into a smile that felt more like a grimace. Well, isn't that a coincidence? I bent down, picked up the cardboard box, and walked slowly into the living room. The box wasn't heavy. It just contained a decade of my work, my passion, my youth. But right now, it felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, crushing the air from my lungs. I slammed it down on the coffee table with a loud thud. The wine in their glasses sloshed, spilling a few drops onto the table like blood. Grace's face went pale. "Marcus, what is this?" Her eyes fell to the box, to the keyboard, the mouse, the programming books, and the employee ID badge with my name on it. Her pupils contracted. "Marcus, I'm fired," I finished the sentence she couldn't. My eyes still locked on Isabella. By her best friend, our company's new CEO, Miss Reed. She handled it personally. The air in the room turned to ice. All the color drained from Grace's face. She looked at me, then at Isabella, her lips trembling, unable to form a single word. Isabella, however, simply arched an eyebrow, a barely perceptible smirk playing on her lips. "Marcus, I'm sorry you had to find out about my relationship with Grace this way. But business is business. Letting you go was a corporate decision. It had nothing to do with me personally." Her tone was so flat. She could have been discussing the weather. A corporate decision. What a perfect, sterile excuse. I had been with Phoenix Technologies for 10 years. I started as an intern and worked my way up to a lead engineer. The company's most profitable core system, Aries. I wrote every single line of its code. It's no exaggeration to say I was the backbone of the entire tech department. And now a single phrase, a corporate decision, erased a decade of my life. Nothing to do with you personally. I laughed, a bitter, angry sound. "Miss Reed, it's your first day. I was the first head on the chopping block, and you're telling me it wasn't personal." Isabella picked up her wine glass and took a delicate sip, her posture as graceful as a swan. Marcus, you need to understand, a company isn't a charity. Your skills are dated. We need younger, more innovative talent. Dated. I almost laughed out loud. Just last month, the Ares system completed a major upgrade that I spearheaded, boosting its performance by 30% and landing the company tens of millions in new contracts. My team and I had pulled 3 months of all-nighters to get it done. And now, she was telling me my skills were dated. It finally clicked. This wasn't a corporate decision. This was a setup. A meticulously planned conspiracy orchestrated by the woman I loved and her best friend. They needed me to finish the most critical upgrade to the Ares system. And then, once my purpose was served, they threw me out like a used rag. They didn't just burn the bridge. They blew it up after I got them across. My heart turned to ice. I looked at Grace, the woman I had loved for 3 years, the woman I had sworn to protect for the rest of my life. She stared at the floor, unable to meet my eyes, her body trembling slightly like a frightened rabbit. Grace, was this your idea, too? I asked, each word deliberate and heavy. Grace's trembling worsened. She looked up, her eyes instantly welling with tears. Honey, don't be like this. I didn't know it would turn out this way. Her tears streamed down her face, a picture of vulnerability that could soften any man's heart. But right now, all I felt was a profound, sickening disgust. You didn't know. I sneered. Isabella is your best friend. She was about to become the new CEO of my company, and she was planning on firing me. You're telling me you knew nothing about it? Grace stammered. Bella mentioned there were going to be some personnel changes. I never thought it would be you. Enough. Isabella, who had been silent, suddenly spoke, her voice sharp with impatience. She walked to Grace's side and wrapped an arm around her like a protector. Marcus, what kind of man bullies a woman like this? Grace has a soft heart. She didn't tell you because she didn't want to hurt you. Now that it's done, you need to accept reality. She looked down on me, her eyes filled with a condescending pity. I know this is upsetting. Tell you what, the company will pay you for the rest of the month, plus a generous severance package. It's more than enough for you to live on while you find a new job. She spoke as if she were tossing a few coins to a beggar. I looked at them. One was the wife I had once adored, now crying in another woman's arms. The other was my wife's best friend. The woman who had just destroyed my career, now looking down at me like a triumphant conqueror. They were a united front. And I was the pathetic clown who had stumbled into their private world. 10 years of work, 3 years of love. All of it had become a joke. An uncontrollable surge of rage and hatred erupted from my chest. I started to laugh. Not a sneer, not a bitter chuckle, but a deep, genuine, booming laugh. Ha! Ha ha! Ha ha! My laughter echoed in the silent living room, sounding jarring and unhinged. Grace and Isabella just stared at me, bewildered. What's so funny? Isabella asked, her brow furrowed. I slowly reined in my laughter, wiping a tear from the corner of my eye. My expression turned cold, my gaze sharp as a razor. I'm laughing at you, I said, looking directly at Isabella. You really think you've won? I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Miss Reed, you think that just because you have the Ares system, you're safe? A flicker of uncertainty crossed Isabella's face. What do you mean? Nothing, I said, slowly standing up. I walked toward them, my eyes scanning their suddenly anxious faces. I just wanted to remind you that the Ares system is my creation. I built it from the ground up. It has a life of its own, and a temper. Sometimes it gets sick, and its illness is peculiar. So peculiar, in fact, that I might be the only person in the world who knows how to cure it. Without another word, I turned, walked into the bedroom, and slammed the door shut. I leaned against the door, my body sliding down until I was sitting on the cold floor. Outside, I could hear Grace and Isabella's hushed, frantic whispers. Bella, what did he mean by that? Did he do something to the code? Grace's voice was laced with panic. Stay calm, Isabella's voice was steady, but I could detect a new note of concern. He's just a disgruntled programmer trying to bluff. I had our team review the Ares source code. It's clean. There are no backdoors. He's just trying to scare us. But no matter what, you have to remember, we are the winners here. Marcus Brennan is out of the picture. Winners. Out of the picture. I covered my face and laughed silently. Isabella, Grace, you were so naive. Did you really think you could steal a decade of my life's work so easily? The Ares system. My baby. I did, in fact, plant a little gift deep inside its core. A time bomb designed specifically for betrayers. I call it Pandora. Once it's opened, not even God can fix it. And the key to activate it was turned the very moment I was fired. The countdown has begun. 30 days. The game is just getting started. I stayed in the bedroom all night. Grace knocked a few times, her voice soft and tearful. Honey, can you please open the door? Let's talk. Marcus, you're scaring me. At least come out and eat something. Marcus Brennan, what the hell do you want? Just open the door. I ignored it all, sitting in the darkness like a statue. I needed to think. I needed to be calm. Rage wouldn't solve anything. Only a cold, calculated plan would make them pay the price they deserved. When morning came, I opened the door. Grace had fallen asleep on the rug outside, a thin blanket wrapped around her. Her hair was a mess, and tear tracks stained her cheeks. She woke with a start the moment I appeared, scrambling to her feet and reaching for me. Honey, you're finally out. I sidestepped her touch, my face an emotionless mask. I want a divorce. The words were spoken quietly, but they hit her like a thunderclap. She swayed, her face turning ashen. Ah, a divorce. Honey, what? What are you saying? I said, I want a divorce, I repeated, my voice devoid of any warmth. You can have the condo, the car, everything. I'll walk away with nothing. No. I won't sign anything. Grace grew frantic, throwing her arms around my waist and sobbing. Honey, I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please forgive me just this once. I'll never do it again. Please don't leave me. She cried hysterically, her body shaking against mine. Before, this would have broken my heart. Now my heart felt like it was carved from stone. I pried her hands off me and looked down at her coldly. Grace, cut the act. You really think I'd ever believe you again? I'm not lying, honey. I love you, she pleaded, grabbing my arm. It was Isabella. She made me do it. She said the company had to get rid of the older employees to grow. That if you didn't leave, she couldn't secure her position as CEO. I had no choice. She threw all the blame onto Isabella, painting herself as a blameless victim. Pathetic. Really. I stared into her eyes. So, when you two were celebrating my termination with a bottle of wine, was she forcing you to do that, too? Grace's face froze, her eyes darting away. I was trying to get her drunk to get information for you. The lies came so easily to her. I had lost all hope. Grace, we're done. I pushed past her and walked into the living room to grab the cardboard box from the coffee table. Marcus. Grace ran after me, grabbing the back of my shirt. You can't leave. I won't let you. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. Let go. I won't. Not unless you promise you won't divorce me. Her voice was shrill, hysterical. I took a deep breath and slowly turned to face her. I looked at this woman I once cherished, who now seemed like a complete stranger. Her face was a canvas of selfishness and greed. She didn't want to stay married because she loved me. She was afraid. Afraid of what I might have done to the code. Afraid of losing the useful tool she thought she could always control. A vicious thought began to sprout in the dark corners of my mind. A cold smirk touched my lips. Fine. You don't want a divorce. We can make that work. Grace's eyes lit up with desperate hope, as if she'd just grabbed onto a lifeline. Really, honey? You really mean it? Yeah, I nodded. I reached out and gently stroked her cheek, my touch as tender as it was when we were madly in love. She visibly relaxed, a joyful smile spreading across her face as she leaned into my hand. I knew it. I knew you still love me, honey. My fingers traced the line of her jaw, stopping at her chin. I tilted her head up. I leaned in close, my lips brushing against her ear, and whispered, my voice low enough that only she could hear. But on one condition. Anything. Honey, I'll do anything you ask, she said eagerly. My gaze dropped to her lips, parted slightly in her excitement. Tonight, I want you clean and waiting for me in bed. My voice was a soft whisper, but it struck her like a bolt of lightning. Her body went rigid. The smile vanished from her face. She stared at me in disbelief, her eyes filled with shock and humiliation. Marcus, you. What do you think I am? What do I think? My grip on her chin tightened slightly, and I watched with a sick sense of satisfaction as she winced. You love me, right? You don't want a divorce, right? This is a perfectly normal thing for a husband and wife to do. I leaned closer, my lips almost touching hers, feeling her warm breath on my skin. Or is all that talk about love just a lie? Tears welled in Grace's eyes again. A chaotic mix of shame, anger, and desperation. She wanted to fight back, to push me away, but she didn't dare. She was terrified I would actually leave her. Terrified that the Ares system was a ticking time bomb. In the end, all that turmoil dissolved into surrender. She closed her eyes, tears clinging to her trembling eyelashes, and gave a faint nod. Okay. I'll do it. I felt nothing. No pity, no remorse. Grace, this is just the beginning. Everything you and Isabella owe me, I'm going to take it all back. With interest. I didn't start looking for a new job. Instead, I used the last of my savings to rent a small apartment near my old office. It had a great view. From my window, I had a direct line of sight to the gleaming high-rise that housed Phoenix Technologies. I bought a top-of-the-line computer, installed the fastest internet connection I could get, and then, like a hunter in a blind, I began to wait and watch. I needed the perfect moment, a single opportunity to bring them down completely. The next few days were quiet. Phoenix Technologies loudly announced the successful rollout of the fully upgraded Ares system. Riding that wave, they signed several major new clients, and their stock price soared. Isabella Reed, the brilliant new CEO, was the talk of the town, her face plastered on the covers of business magazines. And Grace went back to her glamorous life, posting pictures on Instagram of new designer bags, five-star restaurant meals, and afternoon cocktails with her friends. It was as if my departure had made no difference to them at all. They seemed to have completely forgotten my little warning. Forgotten all about the time bomb named Pandora. Then one evening, I got a call from Grace. Her voice was sickly sweet, dripping with a forced, seductive charm. Honey, where are you? Why aren't you home yet? I leaned back in my chair, watching the lights of the Phoenix Tower, and answered flatly. What do you want? Can't I call just because I miss you? She purred. And about what you said before, does the offer still stand? I sneered to myself. What a transparent ploy. She thought one night together would be enough to earn my forgiveness, make me abandon my plans for revenge, and most importantly, reassure her that the Ares system was truly safe. Of course it does, I said, my voice even. I'll text you the address. Come alone. After hanging up, I went into the bathroom and took a long, cold shower. The icy water did nothing to extinguish the fire burning inside me. An hour later, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Grace standing there. She had clearly put in a lot of effort. She wore a black silk slip dress that clung to her curves, with a trench coat thrown loosely over it. Her makeup was flawless, her red lips glossy, and her eyes held a calculated look of timid seduction. She was holding a bottle of expensive red wine. Honey, she cooed, trying to press herself against me. I blocked her, stepping aside to let her in before closing the door. She stood awkwardly in the entryway, nervously fiddling with the hem of her coat. I ignored her and walked to the window, resuming my watch of the building across the way. Honey, what are you looking at? She asked, coming up behind me. She wrapped her arms around my waist, resting her cheek against my back. Just admiring how your best friend is leading my old company to glory, I said sarcastically. Grace's body tensed for a moment before she relaxed again. Don't say that, honey. Bella is just trying to do what's best for the company. Besides, with her as CEO, if the company does well, we benefit, too, right? We. I turned around, grabbing her chin and forcing her to look at me. You really think there's a we anymore? Yes, of course there is, she said desperately. We're husband and wife. Husband and wife. I laughed. Right. I let her go and sat down on the sofa, patting the spot next to me. Come here. Grace hesitated for a second before obediently sitting down beside me. She tried to lean against me, but I stopped her with a single look. Open the wine, I ordered. She didn't dare refuse. She fumbled with the corkscrew, opened the bottle, and poured 2 glasses. She held one out to me, forcing a placating smile. Honey, let's have a drink. Consider it my apology to you. I didn't take the glass. I just watched her. You know, Grace, I began suddenly. The first handbag I ever bought you cost me 3 months' salary. I had just been promoted from intern, and I was only making $4,000 a month. Grace stared at me, confused by the abrupt change of subject. When we got married, I drained my entire life savings to make the down payment on our condo. I even had to borrow $20,000 from my parents, their entire retirement fund. You love to travel. I always said I was too busy with work, but the truth was I couldn't afford it. Still, I secretly saved up every year just to take you on one nice vacation. You said you love surprises, so I, someone who knows nothing about romance, taught myself how to be romantic, planning elaborate gifts for every birthday and anniversary. With every sentence I spoke, Grace's face grew paler. Finally, the wine glass in her hand began to tremble. Marcus, please stop. Why should I? I stared at her, my eyes like chips of ice. I gave you everything. And how did you repay me? You and your best friend played me for a fool. Squeezed every last drop of value out of me and then threw me away like trash. Grace, what is your heart even made of? No, it wasn't like that. She finally broke. The wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Red wine spread across the rug like a pool of blood. She fell to her knees in front of me, clutching my legs and sobbing uncontrollably. Marcus, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I'm a terrible person. I wasn't thinking straight. Please, just give me one more chance, a final chance, please. She cried with a raw, desperate grief. If none of this had ever happened, I might have actually felt sorry for her. But there were no second chances. I looked down at her, my heart unmoved. A chance. I smiled faintly. I already gave you one, remember? I reached down and lifted her tear-streaked face. Why are you crying? Tonight is supposed to be our big reconciliation. I leaned down and kissed her. Her body flinched, but then she stopped resisting, responding with a clumsy, desperate urgency. Her kiss was tainted with the salt of her tears and the faint taste of wine. I swept her into my arms and carried her to the bedroom. I tossed her onto the bed and saw the complex glimmer in her eyes, a mixture of humiliation and a sliver of triumphant relief. A wave of vengeful satisfaction washed over me. Did you really think this would fix everything? Did you think one night in bed would make me forget all the betrayal and the pain? Grace, you were so naive. The night was a blur of calculated passion. Grace tried everything she could to please me, to win me over, as if trying to reignite 3 years of marriage in a single night. She thought this was the start of us getting back together. She had no idea it was the prelude to her complete and utter destruction. The next morning, I woke to find Grace curled up against me like a kitten, sleeping soundly. A small, contented smile graced her lips. I carefully slipped out of her embrace and got out of bed. I dressed without a second thought, without a shred of sentiment. In the living room, I took all the cash from my wallet, a few hundred, and tossed it onto the coffee table. Then I took out my phone and sent Grace a text message. Last night was adequate. Here's some money for your services. By the way, my lawyer will be in touch with the divorce papers. After hitting send, I blocked her number, deleted her contact, and scrubbed her from every social media platform. I opened the door, and the morning sun hit my face, bright and sharp. I took a deep breath, as if to expel all the toxicity of my past. Goodbye, Grace. Goodbye to the fool I used to be. As I closed the door behind me, I thought I heard a desperate, muffled scream from inside. In the days that followed, I cut all ties with my past life. I took on a few freelance coding projects, using my skills to earn my first real seed money. Then I incorporated my own tech company. I named it Retribution. Simple, to the point. At the same time, I made a call to one person, Nathan Cross. Nathan was the CEO of Orion Dynamics, Phoenix Technologies' biggest competitor. We had met once at a tech summit and hit it off immediately. He respected my work and had tried to poach me several times over the years, but I'd always turned him down. Back then, I thought Phoenix was my home. Now, I was the one reaching out to him. Nathan, it's been a while. Nathan sounded surprised on the other end of the line. Marcus, to what do I owe the pleasure? I heard you left Phoenix. Not left. Fired, I said with a self-deprecating laugh. What? Nathan's voice shot up. Fired? Is that woman Isabella Reed insane? Why would she fire you? It's a long story, I said, cutting to the chase. Nathan, I'm working on a new project. I think you might be interested. Oh, I'm listening. It's a brand new intelligent risk management system. Its performance metrics are at least 50% higher than anything currently on the market, including the Ares system at Phoenix. There was a moment of stunned silence on the line. I could almost picture the shocked expression on Nathan's face. Marcus, are you serious? 50% better than Ares. I never joke about code, I said confidently. And as a signing bonus, I have a little gift for you. What kind of gift? Within 1 month, Phoenix Technologies' Ares system is going to completely and utterly crash. I heard Nathan take a sharp breath. Marcus, Nathan, I just need to know one thing. Are you in or are you out? Of course I'm in. Nathan practically shouted. Marcus, where are you? I'm coming to find you right now. The deal was sealed. I joined Orion Dynamics, bringing my new system concept with me. I became the company's new CTO and its second largest shareholder. Nathan gave me carte blanche, unlimited budget, his best people, anything I needed. I assembled Orion's top engineering team, and we began working around the clock. Our goal wasn't just to beat Ares. It was to create something so revolutionary that it would make Ares obsolete. Meanwhile, at Phoenix Technologies, the timer on Pandora's box had quietly reached its first milestone. 15 days had passed since I was fired. I was in a lab running diagnostics on a new system when Nathan burst in, practically vibrating with excitement. Marcus, it's happening. He shoved a tablet into my hands. The screen was filled with breaking financial news headlines. Phoenix Technologies' Ares system hit by critical bug, causing widespread data corruption for banking partners. User panic. Phoenix stock plummets at market open. Crisis of confidence. Phoenix Technologies facing billions in potential lawsuits. Below the articles was an official statement from Phoenix, claiming it was a minor technical glitch that was being urgently repaired. Minor, I let out a cold laugh. This was just the appetizer. The first stage of Pandora was now active. The bomb I had planted wasn't a simple backdoor or a virus. It was an incredibly complex logic bomb. At specific, predetermined times, it would make microsecond alterations to the database. At first, the errors were tiny and almost unnoticeable, a misplaced decimal point here, an extra letter in a user's name there. The errors were designed to be nearly impossible to detect. But over time, they would snowball, triggering a cascading chain reaction that would eventually lead to the catastrophic failure of the entire database. The snowball was now rolling. Isabella Reed must be losing her mind right now, Nathan said, grinning. I heard her entire tech department has been working 24/7 for days, and they haven't found a single thing. They won't find anything, I said calmly, because as far as they can tell, the code is perfect. There is only one person in the world who could fix this bug. So, what's our next move? Nathan asked me. We wait. I closed the news app and went back to my work. We wait for them to come begging. I wasn't waiting for Grace. She no longer had the right to even stand in front of me. I was waiting for Isabella Reed, the proud, untouchable Ice Queen CEO. I wanted to watch with my own eyes as she was forced to cast aside all her pride and beg me for help. I was right. The crisis at Phoenix Technologies escalated faster and more violently than even I had anticipated. The data corruption in the Aries system spread like a virus, from a few clients to all of them. Bank accounts were mismatched. E-commerce orders were shipped to the wrong addresses. Stock market transactions were riddled with errors. The market went into a full-blown panic. Phoenix's stock hit limit down 3 days in a row, wiping out nearly $10 billion in market value. Their partners were terminating contracts and preparing to file massive lawsuits. Federal regulators had launched an investigation. Phoenix Technologies, once a titan of the industry, was now a house of cards on the verge of collapse. And Isabella Reed, the queen who once reigned from on high, was finally getting a taste of what it felt like to fall. I could almost picture her, trapped in her office, a mix of frantic desperation and white-hot fury. That evening, while working late in my new office, I received a call from an unlisted number. I answered it and said nothing. A familiar, cold voice came through the line. "Marcus, it's me, Isabella." Her voice was strained, laced with an exhaustion she couldn't hide. "Miss Reed, an unexpected pleasure," I said, swiveling in my leather chair to look out at the city skyline. My tone was light, as if I were chatting with an old friend. "What can I do for you at this late hour?" There was a pause on the other end. "Where are you?" "I need to see you." Her tone was still clipped, still a command. I chuckled. "Miss Reed, I think you have it backwards. The situation is no longer you needing to see me. It's you begging to see me." "You," I could hear the anger simmering in her voice. "Push it." I shot back. "Is it worse than what you and Grace did to me?" Silence again. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its edge, replaced by a tremor she couldn't quite control. "Marcus, I'm asking for your help. Please help the company. Help me." "If you're asking for a favor, you should learn to ask properly," I said coolly. "My office, tomorrow, 10 a.m. I'll text you the address." I hung up before she could reply. Listening to the dead air, a slow, satisfied smile spread across my face. "Isabella, the show is just getting started." The next morning, at 10 o'clock sharp, Isabella appeared at my office door. She looked exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes that even the most expensive concealer couldn't hide. But she was still dressed in a perfectly pressed power suit, her chin held high, clinging to the last shreds of her pride. I remained seated in my chair, not bothering to stand, and simply gestured for her to enter. "Sit." She sat in the chair opposite my desk and pushed a file folder toward me. "Marcus, let's make a deal." I ignored the folder, looking at her with amusement. "I'm listening." "This is a new employment contract," Isabella said, taking a deep breath to steady her voice. "Phoenix Technologies will rehire you as Chief Technology Officer. The salary is $5 million a year, plus 5% of the company stock. All you have to do is come back, fix the Aries system, and guarantee it never has another problem. $5 million, 5% of the company. A month ago, that would have been a life-changing, earth-shattering offer. Now it was a joke. I let out a soft laugh and shook my head. "Miss Reed, do you really think I need your money anymore?" I pointed to the nameplate on my office wall. "Marcus Brennan, CTO, Orion Dynamics. I'm a CTO and a major shareholder here now. Why on earth would I give all this up to go back to work for a company that betrayed me?" Isabella's expression soured. "Then what do you want?" she asked through gritted teeth. "What do I want?" I stood up and walked around the desk until I was standing over her. She instinctively shrank back, a flicker of fear in her eyes. This powerful woman was finally showing a crack in her armor. I leaned down, my lips close to her ear, and whispered so only she could hear. "I want to watch you beg." Her body went rigid, and the color drained from her face. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with humiliation and rage. "In your dreams, Marcus. Is that so?" I straightened up and smiled. "Then please show yourself out. I won't see you to the door." I made a polite gesture toward the exit. Isabella didn't move. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her hands clenched into tight fists, her nails digging into her palms. She was at war with herself. Every instinct screamed at her to stand up and storm out. But reality had her pinned to the chair. Phoenix Technologies was on life support. If the Ares system wasn't fixed, the only thing left was bankruptcy and liquidation. She would not only lose everything she had worked for, but she'd also be buried under a mountain of debt and likely face prison time. She couldn't afford to lose this gamble. The seconds ticked by in silence. Finally, like a balloon that had been pricked, all the fight went out of her. She closed her eyes, and 2 single tears escaped, tracing paths down her cheeks. It was the first time I had ever seen this Ice Queen cry. "Marcus," she said, opening her eyes again. The anger was gone, replaced by a bottomless pit of desperation. "I'm begging you. Save the company." "Not good enough," I said, shaking my head, my voice cold. "I'm not convinced." Isabella's body began to tremble violently. She stared at me, her face a mask of shame. She knew what I wanted. I wanted her to surrender the one thing she valued most, her dignity. "Marcus, do you have to do this?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Yes," I said without a hint of mercy. "You destroyed 10 years of my life's work and shattered my faith in everything I believed in. This is just me collecting the interest." I walked back behind my desk and sat down, leaning back in my chair like a king about to pass judgment. "Miss Reed, my time is valuable. You have 3 seconds to decide." 3. 2. Just as I was about to say 1, Isabella made her choice. Slowly, she rose from her chair and walked to the front of my desk. Then, as I watched, her knees buckled, and she fell to the floor in front of me with a soft thud. She kept her head bowed, her dark hair hiding her face. I couldn't see her expression, but I saw her clenched fists and the slight tremor in her shoulders. "Marcus, I'm begging you." Her voice was barely a whisper, thick with shame and defeat. I smiled, a wide, triumphant smile. I stood up, walked over to her, and used my hand to lift her chin. Her face was stained with tears, her eyes vacant, like a doll whose soul had been ripped out. "That's better," I nodded in satisfaction. "But just begging isn't enough." My gaze traveled from her swollen eyes down to her tightly pressed, ruby-red lips. "I require a more sincere apology." Isabella's body went completely still. She knew exactly what I meant. A final, desperate struggle flickered in her eyes, but it was quickly extinguished by a deeper wave of despair. She slowly closed her eyes, a gesture of complete surrender, and tilted her head back slightly, exposing the pale, vulnerable line of her throat and her lips. I leaned down and pressed my mouth to hers in a cold, punishing kiss. The kiss held no passion, only conquest and humiliation. Isabella's body was as stiff as a statue. She remained completely still, a beautiful, lifeless doll in my arms. After a long moment, I pulled away. Looking at her broken expression, a twisted sense of pleasure surged through me. "Miss Reed, your apology is accepted," I said, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. "But if you want me to save Phoenix Technologies, that's still not enough." Isabella's head snapped up, her eyes bloodshot. "What more could you possibly want?" she rasped. "It's simple." I walked back to my chair, sat down, and casually propped my feet up on the desk, an image of absolute power. "Tonight. Your office, at Phoenix Tower. You and me." My words were a razor-sharp blade that plunged straight into Isabella's heart. To be debased in her own office, the very symbol of her power and success, it wasn't just physical humiliation. It was the complete and utter annihilation of her spirit. "Marcus, you're a monster," she finally screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "Thank you for the compliment," I shrugged. "You can always say no, but I guarantee that by tomorrow morning, Phoenix Technologies will have ceased to exist." She was shaking with rage but couldn't form a coherent rebuttal. I watched her, a cornered animal in a trap of my making. "Don't forget, Miss Reed, what you and Grace did to me. I'm just returning the favor. 9 o'clock tonight. I'll be there. I trust you'll be ready." With that, I pressed the intercom button on my desk. "Security, please escort Miss Reed out." Isabella was escorted out by 2 security guards. She looked like a ghost, her spirit completely shattered. I knew she was broken. She would be there tonight. At 9 p.m., I arrived at the base of the Phoenix Tower. The entire building was dark, except for a single light on the top floor, the CEO's office. It glowed like a lone, desperate beacon in the night. I had no trouble getting upstairs. Isabella's assistant was waiting for me at the elevator, her expression a mixture of pity and disgust. She avoided my eyes as she led me to the heavy wooden doors of the corner office. I pushed the door open. Isabella was standing in front of the massive floor-to-ceiling window, her back to me. She had changed out of her stiff business suit and was now wearing a long, wine-red silk dress that perfectly showcased her figure. She held a glass of red wine, silently gazing at the glittering city lights below. That skyline, once the symbol of her power, was about to become the backdrop for her ultimate degradation. She heard the door open and slowly turned around. The desperate, broken woman from my office was gone. In her place was someone with an almost numb-like calm. She raised her glass to me, a tragic smile on her lips. "You're here." "I'm here," I said, walking toward her. I took the glass from her hand and drained it in one gulp. I set the empty glass on the windowsill, then took her chin in my hand, forcing her to look at me. "Are you ready?" She didn't answer. She just closed her eyes, her long eyelashes trembling. That was her answer. I smiled. I swept her into my arms and carried her toward the enormous desk that represented her throne. The city lights cast shifting, chaotic patterns of light and shadow across our bodies. It felt as if the entire world was watching this final, brutal act of my revenge. The night was savage. Isabella went from stiff and resistant to numb and compliant. Like a cruel conqueror, I used the most primal method to systematically destroy her pride, her will, her very sense of self. Beneath me, I made her repeat over and over, in a broken, tear-choked voice, her pleas for me to save her company, to let her go. And I just whispered back in her ear again and again the same brutal refrain. "This is what you and Grace owe me." As dawn approached, a quiet stillness finally fell over the room. Isabella lay on the disheveled desk like a broken marionette, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. I straightened my clothes, once again looking composed and professional, as if the beast from the night before had been someone else entirely. I walked over to her, leaned down, and whispered in her ear. "Miss Reed, I was very satisfied with last night's service." Her body gave a barely perceptible flinch. "Now," she asked, using the last of her strength, "can you tell me how to fix the bug in the Ares system?" A tiny flicker of hope remained in her eyes. She believed her sacrifice had bought her company's salvation. I laughed. It was a cruel, triumphant sound. I reached out and gently patted her cheek. "Miss Reed, I think there's been a misunderstanding. When did I ever say I was going to help you fix the bug?" Isabella's pupils contracted into pinpricks. She stared at me in utter disbelief, as if I had told the world's most unfunny joke. "What? What did you say?" I said. I enunciated each word with cold, precise clarity. "I never had any intention of saving your company. I only came here to sleep with you." Boom. The last thread of hope snapped. The tiny flame in Isabella's eyes was extinguished, replaced by an endless, swirling vortex of madness. "Marcus, you bastard. I'll kill you!" she shrieked, scrambling off the desk like a wild animal. She lunged at me, her nails clawing for my face. I easily sidestepped her attack, grabbing her and pinning her back down on the desk. "Kill me." I wrapped a hand around her throat, watching her face turn red from lack of oxygen. "You won't get the chance." I pulled out my phone and dialed Nathan Cross. "Nathan, it's time. Do it." I hung up and released my grip. Isabella collapsed to the floor, coughing and gasping for air like a dying fish. "What? What did you do?" she asked, her voice filled with terror. "Nothing much," I said, looking down at her as if she were an insect. "I just activated the final stage of Pandora. As we speak, the data on every server running the Ares system is being permanently and irrevocably erased. Not only that, but I also took the liberty of packaging up all the evidence of you and Grace embezzling company funds, cooking the books, and stealing my intellectual property. I sent a copy to the SEC and the FBI. Congratulations, Isabella. You and your best friend will finally be reunited. In prison." My words were a death sentence, and they shattered the last remnants of Isabella's sanity. Her eyes widened, her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her entire world had just crumbled to dust. A blood-curdling scream, barely human, ripped through the pre-dawn quiet. She had finally, completely snapped. I didn't spare another glance for the broken woman on the floor. I turned and walked out of the office, leaving the scene of my retribution behind me. As I stepped out of the Phoenix Tower, the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the city. It was a new day. But for Isabella Reed and Grace Brennan, it was Judgment Day. Events unfolded just as I had planned, only more spectacularly. With the Ares system's data completely wiped, Phoenix Technologies was instantly paralyzed. At the same time, federal agents and regulators swarmed the building, seizing everything. Isabella and Grace, as the principal officers of the company, were arrested on the spot for a laundry list of charges, including corporate fraud, embezzlement, and intellectual property theft. I watched the news coverage of their arrests. Isabella, her hair wild and matted, stared blankly into space, muttering incoherently. She looked genuinely insane. And Grace, the woman who had always been so obsessed with her appearance, was makeup-free, her face sallow and pale. Two female officers had to hold her up as she was led away in handcuffs, her face a mess of tears and snot. She saw the news cameras and tried to hide her face, but it was too late. The entire world was watching. The headlines were brutal. Phoenix Technologies executives arrested in massive fraud scheme. CEO Isabella Reed and CFO Grace Brennan face federal charges. Tech giant collapses amid embezzlement scandal. I watched it all from the comfort of my new corner office at Orion Dynamics. Nathan sat beside me, a bottle of champagne in hand. "Marcus, you magnificent bastard," he said, pouring 2 glasses. "You actually did it." "We did it," I corrected him, clinking my glass against his. "Orion is about to become the biggest player in the market." And I was right. With Phoenix Technologies in ruins, Orion Dynamics absorbed all of their former clients. Our new system, which I had named Prometheus, became the industry standard overnight. Our stock price tripled in a matter of weeks. Nathan and I became 2 of the wealthiest men in the tech world. As for Isabella and Grace, their trials were swift and merciless. The evidence I had compiled was ironclad. Isabella was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for fraud, embezzlement, and corporate malfeasance. Grace received 10 years as an accessory to the crimes and for her role in stealing intellectual property. I attended their sentencing hearings. I sat in the back row, watching as they were led away in shackles. Isabella never once looked in my direction. Her eyes were vacant, her spirit completely broken. But Grace saw me. For just a moment, our eyes met across the courtroom. I saw recognition, then horror, then a profound, crushing despair. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. The bailiff led her away, and I never saw her again. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, no closure. Just an empty, hollow sensation in my chest. I had destroyed the 2 women who betrayed me. I had reclaimed everything they stole and built an empire on the ruins of their lives. I had won. So why did victory taste like ash? Years passed. Orion Dynamics continued to thrive. I became one of the most respected figures in the tech industry, known for my brilliance and my ruthlessness. I dated beautiful women, traveled the world, and accumulated wealth beyond my wildest dreams. But late at night, when I was alone in my penthouse overlooking the city, I would sometimes think about Grace. Not the manipulative, selfish woman who betrayed me, but the girl I fell in love with all those years ago. The one who laughed at my terrible jokes and held my hand during scary movies. The one who made me believe in love. And I wondered if, in my quest for revenge, I had destroyed not just them, but myself as well. Because the truth was, I had become exactly what I set out to punish, a monster who used people and discarded them when they were no longer useful. I had sacrificed my humanity on the altar of vengeance, and there was no getting it back. One evening, I received a letter. It was from Grace, postmarked from the Federal Correctional Facility where she was serving her sentence. I almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single page, written in her familiar handwriting. "Marcus, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. What I did was unforgivable. I was selfish, greedy, and cruel. I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too blind to see what I had. I don't expect you to care, but I want you to know that not a day goes by when I don't regret what I did to you. You were right about me. I was a terrible person. But you were wrong about one thing, I did love you. I just loved money and status more. And now I've lost everything. I hope you found the happiness you deserve. I hope destroying us gave you peace. Because if my suffering means anything, I want it to mean that you're finally free. Goodbye, Marcus. I'm sorry. I read the letter 3 times. Then I walked to my fireplace, struck a match, and watched it burn. The flames consumed her words, turning them to ash and smoke. Just like I had consumed her life and turned it to ruin. I poured myself a drink and stood at the window, looking out at the glittering city below. Somewhere out there, Isabella was locked in a cell, her mind shattered. Grace was counting down the days of her sentence, broken and alone. And I was here, at the top of the world, surrounded by wealth and success and emptiness. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But no one tells you that after you've tasted it, nothing else will ever satisfy your hunger again. I had my revenge. I had won. But in the end, I realized the terrible truth: in destroying them, I had destroyed the last remnants of the men I used to be. The men who believed in love, in loyalty, in second chances. That man was gone forever. And in his place stood someone I barely recognized. A king sitting on a throne of ashes, ruling over an empire built on pain. And the worst part? I would do it all over again. Because some betrayals cut so deep, they change you forever. And once you cross that line, there's no going back. My name is Marcus Brennan. I am a self-made billionaire, a tech industry titan, and a man who destroyed everyone who ever betrayed him. This is my story. And this is my confession.